Hello, thank you for coming to my presentation today on security frameworks. When implementing a security framework, it has to be a holistic effort and align with the overall mission in order to succeed. First, an organization has to choose which framework they want to primarily align with. For instance, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework or the ISO 27000 series. Then, they should conduct an assessment and see where their organization stands in relation to that framework. This can come in the form of a risk assessment or just a simple gap analysis. Once the gaps are identified, the organization needs to start understanding them and how they can be remedied. Does more focus need to be put into the infrastructure, training, or hardware and software lifecycle? Ultimately, they should implement the changes in order of priority as it aligns with the business needs and overall mission. Once this is complete, another assessment should be conducted to ensure most or all gaps have been remedied. One of my favorite regulations is the General Data Protection Regulation that was introduced in Europe and adopted in 2016 as a way to better protect consumers through online transactions. The key principles of the GDPR are lawfulness, fairness, and transparency, purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, integrity and confidentiality or security, and accountability. What these basically mean are that online transactions need to occur only for necessary and required purposes and should be minimized wherever possible. All transactions should be secure and maintain confidentiality, integrity, and availability, or the CIA triad. Consumers have the right to secure transactions and data protection, and this is the EU's way to ensure companies comply with maintaining these ethics. For a small business, I'd recommend having a clear mission statement, strong cybersecurity methods in place, antivirus, backing up, logging, and anti-malware, and communicate all needs and requirements from consumers so the business can provide services accordingly. When communication and transactions are transparent, the consumer can feel assured they're being protected and more confident in their transactions. The business will also be able to function more efficiently and drive a stronger consumer base. The reason this is one of my favorite regulations is because of how strict it is and how controversial it is. Many companies that are not as familiar with doing business in the EU have been terribly surprised by the fines and effects of not following the GDPR to protect consumers. For my company, Wagner Technology Solutions, we're focused on integrating the latest tools and technologies while securing the ability to work on-site or from any remote location. Since the pandemic, there's an increasing need to be able to securely connect to corporate networks, even from home. We'll first test new encryption methods and technologies in an air-gapped environment, so any new changes don't affect production. All tools will be tested for closed on-site capabilities, as well as how to connect via virtual private network, or VPN, globally. We'll be focused on protecting corporate data and sensitive customer content and site locations. All capabilities will be tested against the Department of Defense STIGs, since we serve private, public, and hybrid environments, and anyone doing business with the government will need to follow the STIG protocols. We'll be delivering services through the Microsoft Business Platforms and using infrastructure as a service. The infrastructure will be hosted in a secure data center, but will provide for cloud capabilities, offering redundancy and high availability. At Wagner Technology Solutions, the mission is to advance cybersecurity in the global sphere while offering our customers the latest security tools and technology. We always align with the CIA triad and are sensitive to corporate and customer data. We primarily fall short to threats due to the vast amount of tools and technologies available, which are not always backwards compatible. Some encryption methods are unsupported on older hardware, so we work tirelessly to overcome the shortfalls or develop plans to help customers migrate to newer hardware. It also takes time to implement massive changes or appropriately test new technology, so we do struggle with the balance between tested and verified and customer demands. As a global organization, we must also align with GDPR regulations in the EU and ensure we provide full transparency and appropriate backups/data integrity no matter who we're communicating with. One major struggle in our risk management is how broad the NIST cybersecurity framework and the wide range of interpretation available. For NIST, the key steps for the framework establish guidelines and recommendations on ways to secure any infrastructure and how to respond when attacks do occur. The 5 key steps to NIST are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Conversely, the International Standards Organization developed the Information Security Management Specification, which is much more specific than the NIST framework. The framework should include policies, processes, and procedures stating how to implement appropriate procedures and changes, as well as required associations and testing that needs to be performed. There are many required documents and policies that must be included in order to be considered acceptable for the ISO 27001 within an organization, some of which are the scope or area of application of the Information Security Management System, statement of applicability, inventory of assets, risk management process or procedure, risk treatment plan, risk assessment report, and security roles and responsibilities. As you can see, it's much more specific than the broad NIST cybersecurity framework. Under the ISO 27000 series, standards come with PCI DSS and HIPAA, just to name a few. We'll get into these in a little bit. These provide industry-specific regulations that must be followed depending on your field. PCI DSS stands for the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards. Anybody who's operating and submitting payments online must use appropriate encryption methods and appropriate tools, hardware, and software that meet federal regulations. HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, which entitles patients to the right to privacy, and only patients and their doctors are able to communicate without explicit written consent. Otherwise, everything is extremely secured and locked down. Here you can see that a typical workflow of information in a technical environment, including risk assessments, are to implement with other or new technologies. Problems will be identified, brief the problems to leadership. Leadership will then make policy and decisions in response to any problems or issues, and then they'll get approval and guidance from legal before implementing again with new technologies. When determining which framework to use for your organization, it's important to compare and contrast the differences. NIST is extremely broad and can allow for much more interpretation, but it can also be used in conjunction with other frameworks and regulations. The ISO 27000 series is more specific, so determining which one meets organizational needs could be difficult to follow when accounting for growth. Wagner Technology Solutions uses NIST because of our vast customer base and global presence. This allows us to associate broadly and then meet individual customer needs where needed. We focus heavily on security and implement strict security, mobile device, and risk management policies. Risk assessments and penetration tests are conducted semi-annually, while we are keen to implement the latest security tools and identify and mitigate threats swiftly. The Open Web Application Security Project, or OWASP, has developed the Software Assurance Maturity Model, which helps organizations securely develop, test, and implement software in their environment. First, you have to have data governance. What is the purpose? What are the policies? And who owns the data? Next, you design to given specifications and policies. Once designed, you aim for implementation and security. Does it work as intended, and has it been appropriately security or coding fuzzed, which means has it been tested for being able to break? Then you verify against a list of security checklists and other customer requirements. And finally, you deploy to production and enter into the O&M phase, which is the operations and maintenance phase. If incidents occur, you manage them here and adjust as needed. Thank you for coming to my presentation.